So is President Obama's Labor Relations Board biased on behalf of big labor and their union bosses? That's the consensus of the new Congressional report. Joining us now is House Oversight Chairman, Republican Darrell Issa of California. Chairman Issa, as always, welcome, sir. I mean, the headline story here is that the NLRB is biased in favor of unions and their bosses. That's not a shocking headline, but I just wanted to hear some of your key points. What's your most important point in your investigation?
Well, Larry, I think one of the most important discoveries was that there were inappropriate rule violations, what they call ex parte discussions that went on, where you actually have the political appointees and the consul who's prosecuting the case against Boeing essentially having outside the public eye and ear communication. You also have emails that make it very clear that consuls, if you will, in some cases non-political appointees, plus political appointees, they're very biased in their view of what should happen. Quite frankly, rooting for the labor and rooting against Boeing. So this discovery is what we think is a good example of what happens when you make recess appointments that do not go through confirmation, that are not in fact up to the task of heading an independent agency.
Tell me about these. This is interesting. These emails that break the firewall that's supposed to exist. What, between the board members, and you're not supposed. They're supposed to act as judges, and then you're not supposed to email one another. One of these emails said, "Hooray for the red, white, and blue." That was talking about the machinists union in the Boeing battle, where Boeing wanted a non-union shop in South Carolina. What did they do wrong that might actually be prosecutable at some point?
Well, this is one of the challenges, is that these rules are not codified in laws, although they came pretty close to violating every tenet of being an independent agency, and particularly the one where, as you said, these 5 individuals are in fact the jury, and the plaintiff is in fact a prosecutor paid for by the same agency who's supposed to make the case. At the same time, Boeing is supposed to have a fair and impartial opportunity to make their case. And remember, for your viewers, Boeing didn't lay off one union worker. Just the opposite. They hired union workers in Everett, Washington to expand their 787 line, and then they also hired workers in South Carolina at a facility they already owned that had voted out a union.
Right.
They'd previously been covered by the machinists union, but they added jobs there, and this was considered to be retaliation rather than good business sense to have 2 locations making the Dreamliner.
I had 2 quick questions on this because I'm so interested in this board and their judges. Apparently one of the deputy counsels or something, assistant counsel, emails one of the members or somebody and said that she was worried that they might have made the machinist union angry or mad. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. That's in the reporting here, which I guess proves your point, but that's just total bias.
Well, obviously, if you're so concerned that you don't even want the union leadership to be, quote, angry at you, that shows you're trying to play favorites for the union. And of course, remember that this was a suit that as soon as the union settled a new contract with Boeing, they made this go away when, in fact, if it was wrong conduct or misconduct on behalf of Boeing, it should have continued. But in fact, this was used as a technique to get the machinists union a new contract that they liked. Again, clearly something that was not the intention of this supposed independent agency that is supposed to arbitrate the difference between, if you will, union and non-union.
And just being a recess appointments, you mentioned recess appointments. I want to ask you about this. A recess appointment, this is for a board member, I think. The former
for 3 of them.
Top board, the Union of Operating Engineers. This was the general counsel for the Union of Operating Engineers. And according to reports, Chairman Issa, this union was mobbed up, full of criminal convictions. What's a guy like that doing on the National Labor Relations Board? It was mobbed up.
Well, Larry, that's the example of somebody that probably wouldn't have gotten through a bipartisan Senate confirmation. And in fact, one of the challenges is if the courts overturn this as, quote, not a valid recess appointment, which is in doubt, then everything they've done for the last year would be thrown out, but not all the influence they had for the last year, not all the settlements that went forward out of fear. So the effects of the president's recess appointment will happen even if his appointments are ultimately overturned.
Can I just ask you one real quick one? Chairman.
Sure.
Was there any effort by the NLRB to interfere with the Michigan right-to-work election, allowing workers to decide their own paycheck? Was there any interference by the NLRB for an election that went against unions?
At this point, we don't see any, but what we do see is this board has been biased in favor of, if you want to unionize, they're for you. If you want to have a vote to not unionize, they're on the other side. And that's part of President Obama's, quite frankly, he doesn't apologize for it, pro-union agenda. But it's one of the reasons that these right-to-work states continue to be voted is, in fact, that an open shop state is a state that is more attractive to business investment.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Anyway, Chairman Darrell Issa, we appreciate your work on this particular investigation. Many thanks for coming back on the show.